Women don't talk about money the way we should. Not honestly, not openly, and not with each other. But that's changing. I'm Shama Bunton, founder of Wealth Catalyst. And Getting Rich Together is where the conversation lives. Every week, a different woman, a different path, and a conversation that will change how you think about your own financial power. This community is growing and you belong in it. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review so more women can find their way here. Now, let's get rich together. I am here today with the brilliant and beautiful Annie Wright. Annie, you are not only a licensed psychotherapist and executive coach who specializes in trauma recovery for high achievers, but my love, you have clocked in so many hours to help them understand how early relational patterns shape leadership, performance, and success. Something that I believe all humans, not just Silicon Valley leaders, need and want to have access to. It's also why I'm so excited that you've taken your wisdom and your knowledge and have been an incredible speaker and an expert on Forbes, NPR, NBC, and have a new book coming out so the rest of us can actually get up to speed on what it is to live a happy and satisfying life. Decade of Decisions coming out 2026. I'm so excited to have you here today, Annie. Thank you so much for bringing your brilliance to Getting Rich Together.
Oh my gosh, it's a complete honor. And thank you for such a beautiful introduction. I really feel honored and I feel welcomed.
Ah, well, good. So before we jump in to all the big stuff happening now, because you have so many big and exciting things, I would love to take us back to a little Annie, a little girl who maybe she did know she was going to become prolific. Maybe she didn't. You're going to tell me, but take me back to a little girl somewhere between 10, 12 years old. Annie, where were you in this beautiful world of ours? What was life like around you? And what was money like?
Oh, ho, ho. You just asked about probably the most pivotal and painful time in my life. So between the ages of 10 and 12, I was a little girl growing up on an island off the coast of Maine, Mount Desert Island, home to Bar Harbor, Acadia National Park. My biological father had left my mother when I was 6 years old and left us from a middle class life. It plunged us into basically poverty at that point. My mom did everything she could to recover from that, including going back to work, scrubbing people's toilets until she could get a healthcare position. By the time, though, and my father did maintain some custody rights because he had the better attorney. Now, by the time I was 10 or 11, my biological father, who I'm estranged from, and that's an important part of this story, he was a very, very mentally unwell individual. And when I challenged his abusive behavior, he decided to disown me. And so at age 11, right between 10 and 12, he took me to courts and legally disowned me, right? At that point, my mother was stable, but she became the only person who was taking care of me. And it was also, and so my relationship to money at that time was really complicated because he still had a lot of it and she had little. And so I had grown up too on this island. Mount Desert Island is home to the summer cottages of the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Carnegies. It was sort of where the old mainline money used to build their summer homes in the early 1900s. And growing up with, these cottages, which are really mansions on the coast, and then having a more low socioeconomic local population, there was already this very strange story in my head about the haves and the have-nots and what it meant to be somebody with money and who the rest of us were. And then you add on to that my lived experience of, for a time in my life, growing up with a biological father who ran art galleries in Manhattan and Palm Beach. And then, but who also never paid for our groceries or health insurance. I grew up with this completely disorganized view around money, to be completely honest. And it's important to say too, the way he made his money wasn't honest. He, ended up going to jail for being an art thief. So that's a part of my history. And it really messed up my little child mind around either the magical thinking of like tons of money and how does one have it, but it always disappears, or you grind yourself to the bone to barely get by. So those were the money stories I had at that time. But also at age 12, I did something that was really kind of crazy. I decided, you know what? No one in my family has ever been to college, but I'm going to get into the Ivy League. I think that's my ticket off this island. Yeah, yeah. And so I did, right? Like I plunged everything I had into, I took all my childhood trauma, completely subliminated it, right? With disorganized eating, but also an unbelievable drive to achieve and to excel. And I became the valedictorian of my high school, went to Brown, got off the island, right? And I remain a huge cycle breaker in my family for so many reasons. But I do remember thinking, okay, education and money is how I prove my worth and how I get out of here.
My gosh. I mean, it's and you have such wisdom on reflection now, but yet this little girl did not know what was going on, right? It's like there's this
Wow.
moment when you're yeah, when you're little, it's like you're
Wow.
fielding and it's like you're constantly playing
Right.
defense and it's like how do I find myself in the midst of all of
Like
this?
literally, it's just survival. Kids survive in whatever way they can because kids are so powerless in so many ways. We all find ways to adapt to dysfunctional, hostile, or abusive environments. And mine ended up being, let's say, one of the more socially acceptable, also beneficial ways of adapting, like
Mm,
identifying with and drive. It could have gone a lot of different ways. And for many people, it does, right? I'm a bit of a statistical outlier in terms of where I'm at in life now. But yeah, kids just survive in any way they can. And, you get into your early adulthood and maybe you recognize that it was uh, not right or unhealthy, and maybe you don't. It's often like asking a fish, how's the water? If water's the only
totally.
thing the fish has ever known, like,
Oh,
how does it grass?
you just
You know
don't
what I mean?
know, right? It's like you have no context. Okay,
Well,
so
no.
here you are in university. Did you have
Hmm.
to worry about paying for university? Was there any anxiety around that? How did you manage like what you were was it, did Annie already have the plan? Was it like, okay, I'm at Brown, I'm gonna study this,
Oh,
I'm gonna do this
oh my
direction. Did you have like how did
gosh.
you sort of both financially figure out your college career and then also how self-directed and how much did you and what did you know of yourself during that time?
Mm. Well, the reality is my mom was so poor that I got a full ride to Brown. I mean, like that's how I afforded it, right? Like Yale gave me very little. Brown gave me a full ride, right? So it was a no-brainer. I think we ended up paying maybe $10,000,
Oh
some
my
total.
God, Annie.
Yeah. Well, like you have to remember, like Maine, not a lot of us in that state, right? And then
Yeah.
B, I mean, I was Miss Achievement. I was representing the state of Maine down in Washington, D.C. at leadership conferences. Like I was a hustler.
Yeah,
I was a
you
hustler.
were.
And I wrote really a fantastic admissions essay. So, that's how I afforded it. Like,
What was
and
your
what a
essay
blessing.
about? What was the admissions on?
I remember it was called My Mother's Hands, and it was the reflections on her being, a very blue collar worker and watching her grind so hard, grind so hard to provide for her children. And yeah, yeah, really meaningful essay. But you asked a really important question, which was how self-directed was I? I was self-directed to the point where I was like bound and determined to do all the things I wanted without the capacity to really concretely think about what the impact of those choices would be in the future. And one thing we know about childhood trauma is it inhibits the ability to conceptualize a sound, realistic future for many individuals. And that was me. So when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a witch, Indiana Jones, the president, and a children's book author. So
Fabulous.
I got
Check,
to,
check, 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 check.
I know, I was like, and little Annie, so many pieces came true. But what's so funny is like I went to Brown, and the closest thing, and it's just such this beautiful. I love Brown so so much. It's one of the few places in the world where you can get an undergraduate degree in Egyptology. Sign me up. right? Like, yeah, let's check off that little Indiana Jones, desire right there, that little itch that needs to be scratched. And I also majored in history, but I knew at the end of Brown, I would also want to serve in the Peace Corps because I was super, super driven towards service and social justice. So I did all those things. I went into the Peace Corps, served in Uzbekistan, but that's also where, through a confluence of many, many variables, which I will get into someday, that's when the childhood trauma history really caught up with me. And that's when, the bill was due and I had to sort of, face the past in order to have a future. So that
How
was a
old were you?
major. I was, golly, I must have been 23, 20, yes, 23 years old when all that happened. So young, so young. Um, I could keep going, but I want to be mindful that I answer
Yeah,
your
I mean, I'm
question.
just so, I'm curious, like, you know, being so young to have a recognition that something wasn't right, or sort of the allowance, I feel like most of us, if not all of us on this planet, are gifted with crises and moments that we can choose to step through the fire, right? We all get into the crisis. Not everyone is promised to get through to the other side. And that takes a lot of like
Yeah.
consciousness and awareness. And so at this young age of 23, being faced with like, oh my gosh, this is my own version of this is the reality. How did you then start to navigate that with what tools you had available?
Well, I think you presuppose too much of me, my friend. I did not know that was what was happening. All I knew is I was in complete decompensation, plunged into depression and very despairing feelings. I also had no home to go back to at that time. So after the Peace Corps, and we were military evacuated out of Uzbekistan for a variety of reasons. Again, very long story. But I ended up in Washington, D.C., working at a healthcare consulting firm. And that was the first time I had benefits and the first time I got myself into therapy and just even plunged, like even dipped my toes into the water of feeling feelings. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Working at this company, I became friends with the one other hippie, let's say, who was there. And she told me about a place I should probably go visit because I had a portfolio of California clients. And it was a place called the Esalen Institute, which I don't know how many of your listeners know about Esalen, but it is
Oh,
ground. I know, you and I know.
fabulous.
It's ground zero for the human potential movement, right? And I squeezed in a weekend trip there between two consulting clients, and it was like in Berkeley and then down in LA. Everything is, just foreshadowing here. And the workshop was called. It was a weekend workshop called "The Courage to Change Your Life." I drove onto that Esalen property, and it was a whole body yes. I was like, I have never felt more happy in my life. I'm meant to be here. So I did what you only do at 25. I went back. I quit my job. I gave up my Capitol Hill apartment, sold my possessions, and booked a one-way ticket with only $16,000 in savings and a carry-on suitcase. And I went to a 1 month work scholar workshop. I don't know if they still do those at Esalen. But I literally had no plan. And in that month, I was like, I will heal my emotional issues. I will lose 20 pounds and I will find my husband. Again, the thread of magical thinking before the trauma recovery really happened is strong. It was strong in my life. But 1 month turned into two, and I got offered another work scholar opportunity. Then I got something even rarer, which was to be hired on as an extended student, which means you get to stay there for a year and take all the workshops, psychology, spirituality, yoga, all the things, right? And I was working in the Esalen kitchens. Then they got wind of my business background, my sort of presence, and they hired me to be the executive administrator. It was there that I started to piece together what had happened to me. It was there that people said to me for the first time, that wasn't normal. That's not right. That is childhood abuse. Like that's where the awareness happened. I don't know if I would have learned that in a different place, maybe passively, but that's where the awareness really started. That was the first real layer of the healing. And, bonus, I ended up meeting my husband at Esalen and
Ah, so you
we
were
moved in
right. See, I'm
together.
telling you, you think this magical
Yeah.
thinking is like, it's like over here, but then
No,
it's
but here's the
real.
thing. I say this all the time. Dreams do come true, just not always on the timeline you expect they do, right? The magical thinking part was a month, but
I mean, I love that. And so while you were at Esalen, was it,
yeah.
at that point, were
Mm,
you
mm.
going through savings? Was it like, were you sort of
Oh,
like, yeah. So like, were you
100%.
getting paid? I mean, did you have to pay for the massages? Because they have great massage. And so like, tell me, did you get like a hookup on the massage? Like, what was the deal like at
Oh
Esalen?
my gosh. You- I do remember like staff members got discounts on that. I didn't opt into the massages as much as I opted into the workshops. I remember that. But like I had burned through that $16,000. And again, magical thinking, like, what was your plan, Annie? Like, what would you, and again, like 43-year-old Annie wants to bless 25-year-old. I mean, like I'm financially sober now and we'll get to that part of the story. But yeah, I was burning through savings. But when you're an extended student, you earn like a stipend. Your housing is provided for, your food's provided for. It's such a nominal amount you could get like some scones and some cappuccinos at the Big Sur bakery up the road. But like it wasn't anything really. And at the same time, it was at Esalen that I became super clear as I was kind of getting healed more and more and learning how to human and learning how to people. And I always call it my relational trauma recovery 101 happened there, right? It's just the bare bone basics. But it was then that I decided, look, I want to be a therapist. This is the thing that I mean, I hitherto thought I'd become a lawyer, but when I had two books on my little tiny desk at, in my tiny little ocean room, was Clarissa Pinkola SD's Women Who Run with the Wolves or the LSAT prep book. And like my whole body would cringe and feel heavy every time I tried to like look at that, open the pages. And yet when I would open Women Who Run with the Wolves, it was like another full body yes, and it was just
Yeah.
enlivening. And like when you break down the word psychology, it breaks down into psyche logos. And I was like, how cool is that? Like, I want to be a knower of the soul, like knowledge of the soul, right? So I started graduate school when I was at Esalen, working 40 hours a week and then commuting up to San Francisco on the weekends to do my graduate school classes. And there's another long story about how my time at Esalen ended, but what's important, at least for this, is I ended up in the Bay Area to finish my licensure journey. And
Mm.
that's when the financial scaries really set in.
Okay, so you meet the love of your life. You're in Esalen. Like,
Yeah.
is he like, yeah, baby, like work 40 hours a week, do your master's, like, like where did I mean, this isn't a show about relationships, and I'm like, is
So integral to this story too. So my husband's name is Kyle, and Kyle was likewise an extended student,
okay.
working on the grounds department, right? So he looked so sexy and is like with his chainsaw and his blue truck, and we still have that blue truck, 1985 Toyota pickup. But we fell in love. We fell in love, but the problem is we fell in love a few months before I was due to leave Esalen and go up to the Bay Area to finish licensure. So he always quotes the Goodwill Hunting line, "I had to see about a girl." So he left Esalen to move up to the Bay, and that's where we started to build our life.
Wow.
But back at that time, and this is really important when it comes to a money story. I didn't know what I was doing when I signed out all those graduate school loans. I did not know realistically what the path to paying them back would be. I didn't really have an awareness of how expensive the Bay Area would be. I also didn't know that marriage and family therapist interns barely got paid minimum wage to collect their hours. And I remember this, Shama. I remember being at the tail end of my journey as like a graduate student about to do her internship, and I went to the career services office. I'm like, these jobs are only paying like $10 or $11 an hour. Like what am I supposed to do? And what I heard back from that staff member, like bless them, I'm sure they meant well, but they said, well, can't your parents pay for it for you or your husband? We were not married at that point. And just to be clear, Kyle was also earning minimum wage. Both of us grew up with poverty in our backgrounds. Neither of us was at that point. And I was like, these are my options. These are my options. Like parents I don't have a relationship with or relying, like, what? What? So my story to becoming a therapist was truncated by fear, financial fear. I didn't immediately after graduation, and to be clear, I was still working all the time I was in graduate school. I was working 4 or 5 jobs just to pay rent and I was living on student loans. But after graduate school ended, I didn't know if I could make it as a therapist. So I went and I took a job at a nonprofit just for a steady paycheck and just to stabilize. But I could never get rid of that tug in my gut that's like, girl, this is your path. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. But the thing is, still couldn't live on that $10 or $11 an hour. So I became extremely good at business. I started reading every marketing book, every business book, because I was like, you know what? Why don't I build a private practice internship, charge higher rates, have a supervisor take me on, I'll pay them for supervision, but maybe I can make this work. And you know what? I did. And I was I don't know if I was the only one who did this or one of the first who did this, but it was kind of unheard of when I did it back in like 2012. And I got really successful. I started writing online every 2 weeks, long form essays. It really like brought a lot of referrals to me. Those referrals are how I ultimately built my therapy center. We can talk about that. But this all also coincided with my financial sobriety journey, right? The sort of reckoning of what my reality was and the sobering of what it meant to be a responsible financial adult. And that
Mm,
really started in about 12, the year the student loans came due and the year I graduated grad school.
wow. Okay.
Mhm.
So much right here. Okay. So, like,
Uh,
kudos to you for being a brilliant and savvy businesswoman. I feel like
Thank you.
2012 is also it's such an interesting time in the world from like a media
Yes.
standpoint, from a publishing
Yeah.
standpoint, like
Oh
it's
my gosh. And in the tech scene, the IPO standpoint, what was happening in
yeah,
the day at that time.
like it was a
Mhm.
really and I recall it because that's also the year that I started my first business and I remember being like, wow, like there are so many ways. Like it was like the creativity boom of like ways to get to market. And like if you had the tenacity and the vision to do it, like you could really make it work. You still had to hustle, but you had to make it
Oh,
work and there was a way
oh
out of it.
I'm built of nothing but ambition, grit, and determination, right? Like 100% self-made. It was hard. It was hard. They don't train you how to be a business owner or how to be, how to be professionally successful as a therapist. They're teaching you how to be a great therapist, which
Right.
yes, I am. And that was amazing. But it was because of my business acumen and my hustle that I was able to eventually financially provide for myself and then provide for myself very well to the point that no one in my family history has ever been able to do, male or female. And so, yeah, I can talk about that, but thank goodness for business skills.
It's amazing. And so, how soon after you decided to go in this direction did you
Yeah.
have your first like real breath of like, like it's like I feel like in the beginning of things, it's almost can feel as money comes in, it can feel too good to be true. Like, am I going to lose it? Is it going to go anywhere? Like, how do I context this? So, like, what was the first
Ooh.
moment of
Mm, mm,
breathing for you and as you were
mm.
starting to earn money, right, how did you start to organize where it went, like how did
Oh,
you think about
yeah.
like the direction of it?
Well, let me answer that in two parts because they're very different questions. So, my financial sobriety journey started and was forced to be started by those student loan payments come due. I think I had something like 125, 150,000 in student loans for a graduate degree. So that is nauseating, right? Um, and my husband, was likewise boyfriend at that time. Now my husband, we were both financially illiterate, like period, full stop. Like nobody in our family was financially responsible. So I actually enrolled us in Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, and I signed up for, YNAB, You Need a Budget, which I am evangelical about in terms of how it helped me learn to budget and save and understand. And Financial Peace University was also good too, though I am not quite as values aligned with that, teacher. Um, but I really started to understand like what I needed to tackle, what defensive lines of insurances were. And I started to organize me and Kyle in our little financial life. I'm like, let's go get life insurance before all of the things add up on our chart, right? Like we started young. We started young together. We had pennies to rub together. We were living on student loans. So we started off with a highly negative net worth, and we are very financially secure now because of, what we've done together, but what I've primarily done with him as a stay-at-home husband and dad. So the second part of your question, right? So when I budgeted, of course, to like the bare necessities, like rent, food, etc., right? And I had to budget the OpEx, the overhead expenses of my little private pay therapy practice, and I had to budget for those student loans. Had to budget for that. When you say, what was my breathing room? When did I stop feeling scared? Shama, I believe in full honesty. Like I sold my multi-million dollar company at the top of 2025. And this time that I'm speaking to you is the first time I feel like I have breathing room and I'm financially secure. And it's nuts if you look at the numbers on the paper. I literally have paid, I feel like I pay my financial planner who's worked with me since 2019 to alleviate my fears that it won't all disappear. Because here's the thing, when you are the first person in your family to break the poverty cycle, first to go to college, first to, this and that, first to have financial security, there are not enough data points yet in my history to suggest it's still not all going to go away. Now, I have done a tremendous amount of trauma therapy on my childhood financial trauma. But what's also true is I built our wealth within a span of only 7 years. And that's not enough time for the nervous system to necessarily catch up and trust it's not going to all go away. So I'm still working with this, as I think many first gen upwardly mobile individuals have to deal with, right? But I will say I am a masterful steward of my money. I really am exceptional at earning, saving, but I love also to spend. And I want to have a really rich, abundant life with the things that feel good to me. So I think I'm actually quite great at money. And yeah, I do trust that if we lost everything, I could build it all again tomorrow, like knock on wood. And there was this really amazing quote by this super OG, like old school motivational speaker. I think it was Brian Tracy, who said, make $1 million, not for the $1 million, but who you become in making it. So at the other end of this financial sobriety, massive business building journey, I am a completely different woman in 2025 at age 43 than I was in 2012. Like it's just, yeah. I mean, my psychological healing and my financial healing both have fed each other. And I don't think one can exist without the other. And I think
Mm.
women are served by doing both.
Wow. Okay. So in the building of this business
Mhm.
and in the process of also simultaneously building family, right?
Oh,
And like, so it's not
yeah,
like you
yeah,
decided to do one thing. You're like, oh, we're
yeah.
just gonna like
Girl,
do
girl.
all the things and we're gonna like and then we're gonna
Oh,
like
not
figure it
only
out.
Not only that, but may I just say, and again, like at this point, your readers are probably, or your listeners are like, what, who is this person? I launched my therapy center when my daughter was 3 months old, right? Like who does that? Well, you know who does it? An ambitious therapist back in 2019 when real estate was extremely scarce in Berkeley prior to the pandemic, right? I mean, I swear, Berkeley's the most therapist saturated place in the world. I had my eye on this very particular area that I wanted to be in, very particular building. And they had these corner suites that only came open every couple of years. Well, guess when one came open on my mat leave. So I had this super colicky baby after a very high risk pregnancy. The place came up and I was like, well, this is really terrible timing, but I guess I'm going to bet on myself. So I did it. Right. And in the early days, my husband Kyle, he was building the office furniture, soundproofing the doors. I was laying Alice down on a little mat for tummy time while I filled the file folders and refilled the tissues. Right. Like it was a family business. And she grew up with the therapy center and it was brutal. And of course, then came the pandemic and it was just us and her and like doing all of this. I ended up retiring him in December 2021 because back then daycares had a zero sniffle policy, and what is a 1.5-year-old but constant sniffles? So we were averaging like 2 days a week at daycare, and my career was taking off. So we were like, Kai, I think this is our leap. So we did take that leap, and he has worked for me at my company since, and he is the reason I can have a career of my size. And he's helped my psychological healing so much, but he is a huge part of the reason why I can be successful as a working mom. And yeah, we have built quite a bit from nothing together, and I really want to honor him for that.
That's so powerful. What double click on sort of the conversations that you guys had together. We've spoken to a number of women on the show, and everyone's unique story about, I'm the primary earner. I've heard so many different sort of ways of how that conversation goes down. And I feel like, to the women who are listening to the show, it's like, I think a lot of people think it's going to be scary, but it ends up being really liberating. It's like, but
Yeah.
anyway, tell
Well,
me,
I
what
mean,
was it like?
well, like I think this is it may be same, but different in a lot of couples. I'm not sure. In our relationship, I embody more of the attributes that are more typically ascribed to men and masculinity: the drive, the ambition, the hunting, the building. Like that is me in my core, although I identify as a woman. My husband is a natural born nurturer. Like he is the most happy tending to the people and the places he loves. That's actually not me in my genetics. So you combine that with the fact that I was earning about 6 times he did. He doesn't have the ambition drive gene. I do. It was a pretty easy decision for us. We were going to gamble on this constellation because it made sense for us. And it still makes sense for us in a lot of ways. We'll reevaluate it when it doesn't make sense anymore. But we have a 7-year-old. She still comes home sick. I don't like public school has a lot of vacation. Like, so it still makes sense for us, right? And like he's with her at a bakery right now, probably at the library. So I can do this podcast interview in silence. Like it is still working out for us.
Oh my God, that's so incredible. Okay, so now take me to the height of the business, and sort of, you're now at this level, right, where you're able to sort of look back at sort of the lifeline. It's like, all right, things were here where they were down, and then they went up, and then it's
Right,
like, the
right.
different sort of gyrations. Everyone thinks that money should be this like hockey stick, or that life should be a hockey stick, and it's like, no, actually,
Oh,
things are not like that, right? Like there are so many things
it's
that happen on the way to the top.
100%. Well, listen, I think this is very salient to where I am now because I did have atypical success. Look, you want to talk about timing a market, launch a therapy center in 2019 and then go through a global pandemic. My business exploded. I would never wish the pandemic on anyone, but man, it blew up my business. So for me, when you look at the top line revenue of my business over the course of 6 years, it was nothing but a constant up. And so psychologically, and as did my pay, it was nothing but a constant up, which was atypical for a business. However, it did allow me to sell the business. But now that I've sold the business, my cash flow looks nothing like what I was taking home as the earner. So I'm actually in a period of time where I'm like having to wrestle with this, like, oh, that's okay, right? Like it's okay that it's not like a constant growth path up, that there might be these ebbs, or that maybe sometimes wealthy or entrepreneurial people take a hit for a couple of years so they can build their next thing. So that's a new level of my own money learning, my own sort of financial healing and education, as it were. But my business growth success was quite vertical. So yeah,
That's
yeah,
so
yeah.
exciting, Annie.
Oh, thank you. But again, I mean, I was raising a toddler, building a thing that I never know, and like you could fill an encyclopedia with all the things I did not know as a business owner and entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, if you want to get a PhD in running a business, do it in the state of California with W-2 employees in a professionally licensed organization. You will learn every mistake ever, right? So I am grateful for the hardship of those years, both raising a
Mm.
highly sensitive child and running a very hard business model. It really carved out capacities in me that I did not know I was capable of.
Wow. That's really, I mean, okay, so walk me through some of the dominoes that fell that both signaled to you it was time to sell the business, right? So, like, how did you decide, it's time now? And, or did someone else tell you, hey, I think you should sell now? Like, what were some of the dominoes that fell to help you realize that you were ready to take on something different and that you felt complete with this?
Super great question. So I can trace this back to 2017 when I went to a mastermind called Next, and it was for therapists who were doing really, really well as individual practice owners. I'd only been licensed for a year there, but like I was doing really, really well. And I remember being at a watershed moment where it's like, well, you can start to double down on your personal brand. And look, Shama, I started writing online in the spring of 2015, long form, high quality mental health articles every 2 weeks, including through mat leave, my cancer surgery, all of it. I had built up a pretty big readership, right? But at the same time, I was getting referrals like picking grapes off of trees. I'm like, well, what do I do? Why don't I build a therapy center first, and then I'm sure I can double down on the personal brand. I'm sure how hard could building a therapy center be? Well, turns out it's very hard, and it took a lot of time away from the personal brand. So just like I told you, when I had originally gone to the nonprofit out of fear, right? And I couldn't ignore that tug inside of me that's like, this isn't what I meant to do. Yes, I'm good at it, but this is not my calling. This is not my mission. I'm super proud of the therapy center I built. I had a wonderful team of clinicians, still have a wonderful team of clinicians who do great work, but I knew there was more inside of me that I had to start to produce and give back and really live out my life mission. So it was when that tug became too painful to ignore that I knew this is the time, right? This is the time. So I always listen to those tugs. I listen to the full body yeses. Now, turns out selling a business is almost as hard as actually building one. But I did secure a deal after the first one fell through, and I sold in January 2025. Best decision I ever made. And now I'm in V2 of my career, and I feel very proud of what I've done. I feel proud to be a successfully exited entrepreneur who can work with entrepreneurs and small business owners and folks who run companies and have the literacy to be able to talk about some of these issues that only business owners know. At the same time, my mission is very clear about what I'm meant to do in this world.
It's amazing. So let's talk about the mission. You are, if nothing else, but a really that you claim not have not always been self-directed. It's clear your spirit has had direction. And whether or not you
Oh,
knew the direction was happening is up for debate. But your spirit has had a really distinct way of communicating
mm,
with you and leading you down paths and ideas. And certainly things have just
yeah.
unfolded in magical ways that I imagine are just beyond what you possibly could have think was possible, and sort of, yeah.
100%. Although I will say that I'm a big fan of creating vision boards. Like I treat them like art forms because I do think a clear vision and sort of like a, being convinced that you can do it combined with hard work will get you anything you want, right? So everything on my vision boards has come to pass. But look, as far as my life's mission, here's the thing. And I trust in the universe. The universe has been helping me the whole time. I have also, I'm a trust in God but tie your camel kind of girl, like say a prayer but move your feet. And what's also really important to know is one of the tertiary stages of trauma recovery work is making meaning of your experience. So there's a part of me that believes I was meant to go through that. And now the way I make meaning of what happened to me is to turn around and make sure that those who it also happened to, those who had lousy, unfortunate childhoods, can still have a really amazing adulthood if they do the trauma recovery work. Because so much more is possible when we do. And my hope too is to empower generations of women and girls that have been bound and strangled by these various concentric circles of challenges and suffering. The relational trauma we experience in our homes, the trauma we experience at the hands of oppressive social systems, patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, colonialism. My work is to work on the individual level, helping people start there, because a more psychologically empowered woman can become a more financially empowered woman, can become a more politically empowered woman. So I take my mission very seriously to help as many people as I can recover from relational trauma.
It's really the word that comes to my mind, it could be the wrong word, but what feels, it's so noble, Annie. Like you're so like there's such a sense of like, like
Oh, thank
let's
you.
heal ourselves, let's help each other, and let's live for the version of ourselves and the vision of our lives that we want. And all of that, I agree with you, is within reach and possibility. And certainly there are so many ways to get there. And it's incredible that you're dedicating your life to supporting others in achieving that for themselves. So let's turn our attention to your book. Let's turn our attention to, how humans, right? How you want humans to start to engage with you, how you want them to start to see Annie Wright in this, 3.0 or 4.0 version, because now, this
Yeah.
is the next this
Mm,
is the next leap, right? This is the next big sort of expansion on a body of work that you've created, and an
right.
honoring of the woman who you've always been, but yet also so much bigger and greater. So
Mm, mm,
unpack sort of what this next leap looks like, and how you really want people to come and find you and work with you and
yeah.
absorb this content that you're producing.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, and the ideas and the vision is still forming to a certain extent. I have clocked well over 15,000 hours as a practicing therapist. I am one of the most highly trained trauma therapists in my, professional cohort of my little generation. I'm I am at the head of my cohort for this particular niche. I'm very rigorous. I'm not a pop psychologist. I'm not a TikTok health guru. Like I am a rigorously trained clinician. I've done so much one-on-one work, but now the challenge for me is how do I amplify that work to more people? And that will be through books, that will be through online courses. It's already through my Substack, but it's really in creating deliverables that can help people start to see themselves and their stories more clearly and help them get the appropriate kind of support to do the healing that's required in order to have a beautiful adulthood. My writing has always been about that for 10 years. But now the question is, how do I translate my clinical acumen and my skills at writing to creating a curriculum, a sort of relational trauma recovery school, as it were, with various means of entry that can help people lead good lives, love themselves, undo the trauma, have healthy relationships, have great boundaries, believe in themselves financially, know what they want to do professionally, and live while they're still alive. Because so many people with unresolved trauma continue to just survive versus live. And I want my body of work to outlast beyond me. I don't know if I would call it noble. I think that's a very generous thing for you to say. I think, to a certain degree, I I want to leave this. Well, I get emotional when I talk about it. I want to leave this body of work behind for my daughter. So, because I'm not a perfect mother, and if she needs the tools and the skills to recover from anxiety or develop healthier attachment styles, I want her to have that work, and I want the work to last beyond me. So, yeah, I my next chapter is really about translating the work into ways that can help even more people.
I love that, Annie. There's we've talked about money today, and in a lot of serious ways, right? It was a lot of, how do you navigate it through business? How do you navigate it through shaky childhood? All the different stories around money. Um, but certainly money, and I think you alluded to this earlier, money can also be really fun. And, you talked about, putting a bucket that's also like for fun, and making sure that you're able to enjoy your money. And so I'd love for you, and this is one of my favorite questions, but what is what goes into the fun bucket? So how do you come up with like, the percentage in the fun bucket? And then also, what is your most like fun, fabulous way in which you've spent your money lately? Like what has brought you joy lately with your
Oh my
money?
Oh my gosh, it is two words. It is international travel. I wish I had a less expensive hobby, but that is the thing that lights me up. We're back to the Indiana Jones. We're back to the little girl on the island who used to like look at her globe and just dream about seeing the world. I mean, what little Maine kid goes to Uzbekistan? I mean, really, like I am fed by travel, not so much domestically, but internationally. I have always loved different cultures. I love adventure. I love putting myself into uncomfortable positions. My favorite thing in the world is traveling with my husband and daughter. And now, experiencing international travel with a 7-year-old, right? So that's a huge place where we put our money. We also spent our money on my dream home, our dream home. It is the most beautiful home ever. I am deeply fed. I'm a homebody who also likes to ride camels in the Sahara Desert with her 4-year-old. But like, I'm like that very weird dichotomy. I'm like, don't ask me to leave my house after 5, but sure, like I'll go, to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Sure, no problem. I spent a lot of money on this house because it is stunning, and I am deeply fed by aesthetics and our forest and like all the beauty of it. So that's really where we prioritize spending. Also, we prioritize spending on our health, really good
Mm,
food, vitamins, etc. Because it's hard to enjoy your life when you don't have enough energy or health to enjoy it.
no joke.
So that's really fun. And honestly, if I'm talking about a really guilty pleasure, like sometimes I'll buy both the Audible book and the Kindle book so I can switch back and forth depending if I'm laying in bed or I'm doing chores. That's probably like and people are always like, well, you could just wait for it at the library. I'm like, I don't like to wait. Like if I want that book, I want that book now. That's another place where I spend a lot of money. Audiobooks and
I love
yeah.
that. It's so lovely, Annie. And then my last question is really around, I know you're in this space of
Mm.
developing and defining the next chapter, but what is it that
Mm.
our audience can do for you? What do you need? Who do you need? What do you need? How
Oh,
can we show up for you?
oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Look, I would just love for people to come to the website, uh, AnnieWright.com. Read what I write and see if it speaks to you. I mean, I do my work in the world with driven and ambitious women who come from relational trauma histories. And sometimes you don't know what that is until you see yourself in my writing. You're like, oh, that's me, right? And so then there's a wealth of free information on my website. There are quizzes, but you can also
Mm.
come and join my Substack. I'm developing a signature online course. I'm going to be launching monthly master classes all through 2026. I just want to deliver information, transformative information and education in a way that moves the needle for folks. So come
Hmm.
to the website, all there. And, maybe I'll see you at the keynotes I'm doing at counseling associations across the country. I don't know. I'd love to get a TED Talk one of these days. But yeah, I would just love for people to see more of themselves in what I write so that they can take the next right steps for themselves.
I love that, Annie. It's been such an honor and a gift to spend this time with you, to hear your story. No one else can see the light in your face, but boy, do you emanate great amounts of beauty, joy, and light. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
opening up about all these important conversations, and really being vulnerable about who you are
Uh,
and the woman that you've become and what your hopes and dreams are for the world. It's been a gift to have you here today. Thank you.
It's really been a gift to be able to share, Shama. So thank you so, so much. I do truly believe that the more open I am about my story, the more I might be a little lighthouse of hope for people who wonder if that's possible. So I do really appreciate all the lovely reflections you've given me and also just the chance to share my story. I haven't shared it in as much depth on any other podcast before, so I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening. This is the conversation we come back to every single week. Real women, real wealth, and what becomes possible when we stop being silent about money. If today's episode moved you, don't let it stop here. Wealth Catalyst is where women go to take it further. Our Freedom Tour salons are gathering women in 32 cities this year. Intimate evenings in homes and private spaces where women talk honestly about money, risk, and what they're building. And if you're ready to go even bigger, join us at the Wealth Catalyst Summit, a full-day event in San Francisco this October. Find your city and claim your seat at wealthcatalyst.com. We'll see you there.